My 77-year-old stepdad crossed the line. How I faced his creepy advances and my mom's silence. He was meant to be family, but his disturbing actions shattered my sense of safety. Left scared and isolated, I struggled to find the strength to speak out against the betrayal lurking within my own home. I never thought I'd find myself frozen in fear in my own bedroom, the one place I always believed would be safe. But here I am, 30 years old, living back in my mother's house, in a quiet suburb outside of Portland, Oregon. Life had knocked me around a bit, job instability, a breakup, and a failed attempt to make it in Los Angeles had led me back to the pale blue guest room of my childhood. I had hoped that coming home would feel like healing. Instead, it became something I never could have predicted or prepared for. My mom had remarried after my father died when I was 12. Her new husband, Gerald, was much older, nearly 20 years her senior. I never bonded with him growing up, but he was polite, distant, and harmless. Or so I thought. Now in his late 70s, Gerald had started showing signs of forgetfulness, misplacing things, repeating questions, sometimes staring into space for long periods. My mom said it was just aging, maybe early dementia. But what I experienced that night went far beyond forgetfulness. It was around 2:00 a.m. when I stirred in my bed, woken by the familiar sound of my cat yowling outside my door. She does this often, scratching and whining to get in or out, so I usually leave the door slightly ajar. I rolled over half asleep, ready to call out to her, but stopped cold. Standing in the darkened doorway was a figure, motionless, staring. It took a second for my eyes to adjust and realize it was Gerald. He didn't say a word, just stood there in the dim hallway light that spilled across his face. His expression was blank, but his eyes were locked on mine. I froze, literally couldn't move a muscle. My breath caught in my throat. I kept waiting for him to say something, to apologize, to act confused, to do anything that might make this moment less eerie. But he didn't. He just slowly turned and walked away. I lay there, heart pounding in my chest, unable to sleep. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe he thought it was the bathroom. Maybe he heard the cat. But even then, he looked at me. He saw me. And he didn't leave right away. 15 minutes later, I was still wide awake, gripping my phone under the covers like it was a weapon when it happened again. The door creaked open a second time. Gerald. Same position, same stare, same silence. I couldn't take it. I sat up in bed abruptly and we just stared at each other for a moment. I didn't say anything. I don't even know why. My voice caught in my throat. I was terrified, but also confused. I didn't want to accuse him of anything, but something was off. He turned again and disappeared down the hall. That time I got up and closed the door, completely wedging a chair under the handle. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment over and over again, my mind spiraling. Was it just his dementia? Was he confused? Or was there something more sinister behind those glassy eyes? The next morning, I didn't say anything. Not yet. I felt like I needed to process it. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was still just raw from everything else in my life. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't normal. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. I began noticing other things after that. Gerald would linger a little too long when passing me in the hallway. He seemed to always be nearby when I came out of the shower or went to get a late-night snack. I told myself it was coincidence, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But I started sleeping with my door locked and a chair pressed under the handle. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Worse, like prey. Trapped. Still, I said nothing to my mother. She adored Gerald. They had this quiet little life together, early dinners, crossword puzzles, gentle banter over cups of tea. I didn't want to be the one to shatter that. And honestly, part of me doubted she'd believe me. Or worse, she'd excuse it. So I kept it to myself, and the weight of it began to grow. What do you do when you feel unsafe around someone who's supposed to be family? What do you do when you're too scared to accuse, but too scarred to ignore? And the worst part, this was only the beginning. 2 weeks after the night, Gerald stared into my room twice. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I tried to pretend everything was fine, smiled at breakfast, talked about the weather, helped my mom with the groceries, but every time I heard his slippers dragging across the hardwood floor or the creak of a door in the hallway, my stomach knotted with dread. It was like living with a bomb that could go off at any moment. Not with violence, but with the unbearable weight of discomfort, violation, and unspoken truths. And then it happened again. It was around 11:00 p.m. I had just taken a shower and was walking down the hall in my robe towel around my hair. Gerald was standing at the end of the hallway facing me. He didn't say anything, just stared. I clutched my robe tighter and walked quickly into my room, locking the door behind me. That was the last straw. The next morning, I found my mom sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, flipping through her morning crossword. Sunlight streamed in through the window. It felt wrong how normal everything looked while I felt like I was unraveling inside. "I need to talk to you," I said, sitting down across from her. She looked up, mildly concerned. "What's wrong, honey?" I took a deep breath, my heart thudding in my chest. Something happened. Actually, a few things happened, with Gerald. Her face twitched, a flicker of confusion and worry. "What do you mean?" So I told her. I told her about the night he stood in my doorway twice, how he didn't say a word, how he just stared. I told her how he had tried to walk into the bathroom while I was inside, how I'd had to raise my voice for him to back off. I even told her about how uncomfortable I felt when he lingered too close too often. Her expression shifted from concern to something else, something like defensiveness. She didn't speak right away, just pressed her lips together and stared into her coffee mug like it held the answers. Finally, she said, "He's been having memory problems lately. You know that." I stared at her in disbelief. "You think forgetting things explains him standing in my doorway in the middle of the night twice and not saying anything, just watching me sleep? He might have thought it was the bathroom. That doesn't explain the second time, or him not reacting at all, or the way he touches me. I stopped myself, because I hadn't told her that part yet, the part that still made my skin crawl just thinking about it. I took another deep breath. When I got back from my trip last week, he hugged me, and his hands went down to my butt, like patting it. Now she looked up, shocked. "You must have misunderstood," she said quickly. "He's old." His hands shake. He's not fully aware of where he's touching. "No," I said louder than I meant to. "Mom, I'm not crazy. I know where his hands went." And I pushed them away immediately. Silence. She blinked a few times and looked away again. "I'll talk to him. You'll talk to him. What else do you want me to do? He's my husband. He's sick. I want you to take this seriously." She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "I'll tell him not to go into your room, and to be more careful. That's it." "What do you want me to do? Kick him out?" I didn't answer, but the silence between us spoke volumes. That night she did talk to him. I heard her voice firm but not angry, like she was scolding a child for knocking over a glass of juice. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard my name. I heard her say, "Don't go into her room again." Then the subject changed to laundry. It felt so small, so insufficient. I waited for Gerald to come to me and apologize, or at least acknowledge that something had happened. But he didn't. The next morning he smiled at me like nothing had changed, asked if I wanted oatmeal. I felt like I was going insane. I called my best friend Angela and told her everything. She was furious, said I should pack my bags and leave immediately. But it wasn't that easy. My savings were tight. I didn't have a job yet. The thought of couch surfing or begging for space made my pride bristle, and part of me still hoped my mom would come around, but she didn't. Over the next week, things returned to normal, at least on the surface. Gerald kept his distance, but the damage was done. I'd lie awake at night, heart pounding, listening for every creak and whisper in the house. I started locking the bathroom door. I avoided walking past him in tight spaces. I flinched when he came too close. I was a guest in a home that was supposed to be mine. A stranger in the place I grew up. And the worst part, I felt abandoned by the one person who should have protected me, my mother. She didn't yell at me. She didn't accuse me of lying. But her passiveness was its own betrayal. It said I'd rather keep the peace than confront the truth. And I didn't know how much longer I could live like that. I had always thought that my silence was a form of strength, a way of not letting fear rule me. But after everything that happened, I realized that silence is sometimes a prison, not a shield. It happened on a Sunday. Mom had gone to church, something she'd started doing more regularly in the past few years. I usually stayed behind. Faith had always felt more like her thing than mine. That morning I was in the kitchen pouring cereal, still in my pajamas, an oversized t-shirt and shorts. The sun poured through the window in golden sheets, giving the illusion of peace. Then I heard the floorboards creak behind me. I didn't even have to turn around. I knew it was Gerald. "Morning," I said flatly, keeping my eyes on the cereal bowl. I hoped he'd just pass through, go sit in his recliner, watch his news, be invisible like he used to be. But he didn't. I felt him come closer. The air shifted. I gripped the spoon a little tighter. "Your mom's off to worship," he said. His voice was raspier than usual. "Just us in the house now." I didn't reply. I was frozen again. That same horrible paralysis I'd felt in my room returned, tightening my limbs like invisible ropes. Then it happened. He touched me. His hand came down softly, deliberately on the small of my back, slid lower. I jolted forward, spilling the milk. The bowl hit the floor with a shattering crash. I didn't care. I spun around, breath shaking. "Don't you ever touch me again." Gerald blinked like I'd spoken another language. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." My voice was shaking but loud. "You just grabbed me. I was just passing behind you." "Don't you lie to me," I yelled, pointing a trembling finger at him. "Don't you dare pretend this didn't just happen." He held up both hands like I was the aggressor. "You've got an overactive imagination, girl. Say that again and I swear I'll call the police." He blinked, the calm mask slipping for a moment. His lips curled into a condescending half smile. "You really want to put your poor mother through that? Over a misunderstanding?" And there it was, the truth behind his smile. A threat, wrapped in pity. He was testing me, betting I'd stay silent again. I backed away slowly, stepping over the broken bowl. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My whole body was shaking. I locked myself in my room and sobbed. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't old age or confusion. This was calculated, predatory. I didn't wait for my mother to come home. I couldn't stand the thought of confronting her again and hearing the same dismissive excuses. Instead, I called Angela. She came over in 20 minutes. I threw clothes into a bag with shaking hands, stuffing it so full the zipper nearly tore. Angela didn't ask questions. She just helped. I didn't even look at Gerald when I passed him on the way out. He was sitting in his chair, sipping tea, watching the news like nothing had happened. That night, I slept on Angela's couch, safe but shattered. The next day, I finally called my mom. My voice trembled through the whole conversation. "I'm not coming back," I told her. "Can we please talk about this?" she said. "You left so suddenly." "You know why I left." There was a long pause. "I talked to Gerald," she said softly. "He said you were confused, that you misread a situation. He says you're emotional right now." I laughed bitterly. Of course he did. I don't know what to believe. And there it was. Not disbelief, not even denial. Just doubt. Just enough to let Gerald stay. Just enough to let me go. "You don't want to believe me," I said, "because that would mean admitting the man you married is dangerous. That would mean choosing me." "I love you," she whispered, "but I also love him." And that was the last straw. I hung up. For weeks, I spiraled between anger and grief. Not just over what Gerald did, but what my mother refused to do. The betrayal ran deeper than the touch itself. It was in the way she turned away from me, the way she let her silence speak louder than any apology. Angela helped me get a job in her office. I found a tiny studio apartment 3 months later. I rebuilt my life in pieces, a bed frame 1 week, a coffee maker the next. Little by little, I carved out a space where I didn't have to sleep with one eye open. But the fear never fully left. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night convinced someone is standing at my door. Sometimes I still flinch when older men pass too close in the grocery store. Sometimes I still dream about Gerald's face, blank, distant, watching. And worst of all, sometimes I still miss my mom. It had been nearly 8 months since I left my mother's house, since I left him. I thought time and distance would dilute the pain, maybe even make it feel like something that had happened to someone else. But trauma has a cruel way of lingering in the body. It doesn't just live in memories, it lives in muscle, in reflex, in breath. I hadn't spoken to my mother since that day on the phone. Occasionally, she'd send a text, "Are you okay?" or "Thinking of you." I never replied. I couldn't. Every time I saw her name on my screen, I felt a rush of betrayal so sharp it nearly made me nauseous. She chose him. She chose him. But closure is a strange beast. It either finds you when you least expect it or demands to be confronted when you're least ready. It was early March when Angela showed me the post. She sat across from me at the cafe where we always met on Saturdays. Her face was pale, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned her phone toward me. "It's from the neighborhood group," she said. "You need to see it." There, it was a blurry security camera screenshot. Gerald, standing outside someone's backyard, at night. Captioned, "Anyone else have this man creeping around? My teenage daughter found him staring through her window." My vision went black around the edges. I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling over. The comments were flooding in beneath the post. "That's Gerald H., right? He lives on Maple Drive with his wife. OMG. He was at my garage sale and wouldn't stop asking my niece weird questions. This man's not just confused, he's dangerous." My stomach twisted. Rage, guilt, horror. It all swirled into one unbearable storm. I had told myself that leaving was enough, that by removing myself from the situation I had done my part. But what if he had turned to someone else now, someone younger? Someone who couldn't leave Angela reached across the table, gripping my hand. "You have to do something." I tried. I whispered. I told my mom. She didn't believe me. She doesn't have a choice now. That night I drove to the house I said I'd never return to. The pale blue exterior hadn't changed. Gerald's beat-up Chevy was still in the driveway. Porch lights on, curtains drawn. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, debating whether to walk away. But then I remembered the girl from the post, the one who found him watching her through a window. What if no one believed her either? I rang the doorbell. My mother answered. Her eyes widened when she saw me, red rims framing a face that had aged a decade since I left. "Emily," she breathed. "You came. I need to talk to you," I said. "Now." She stepped aside slowly, like part of her had been rehearsing this moment in dreams she couldn't admit out loud. The living room was the same. Same dull couch, same mug of lukewarm tea on the side table, but the air felt heavier. The walls seemed to lean in. Gerald wasn't there. Yet. I saw the post online, I said, not bothering with small talk. I saw what he did. She nodded slowly, sat down on the edge of the couch. Her hands trembled. I didn't want to believe it before, she said, voice hoarse. But now I don't know how I didn't see it. I almost didn't believe what I was hearing. "You believe me now." Tears filled her eyes. "I think I always did. I just couldn't handle what it meant if I admitted it. That I brought him into your life. That I kept him there. That I let him hurt you." I swallowed hard. "He's not just hurting me. He's watching other girls now. Strangers. He's escalating." She buried her face in her hands. "I want to report him," I said. "And I want your help." She looked up slowly, shame carved deep into her features. "I'll do whatever it takes." Just then we heard the door creak open. Footsteps in the hall. Gerald. He stepped into the room like a man walking into his own kingdom, oblivious. When he saw me, he paused, brows twitching in confusion. "Well," he said slowly, "look who finally came back." I stood. "Sit down, Gerald," I said, my voice ice. His smirk faded. He looked at my mother, then back at me. "What's this about?" "We know," she said. Her voice shook, but it was stronger than I'd ever heard it. "We know everything." He opened his mouth, maybe to lie, maybe to manipulate, but I stepped forward and cut him off. "You're going to be reported. There are witnesses, and you won't be able to worm your way out this time." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Real fear. It gave me strength. "I suggest you start packing your things," I said. "Because this house isn't yours anymore. You're done." He didn't speak. He just stood there, shoulders slumped slightly, before retreating like a scolded dog. The silence that followed felt like an exorcism. My mother collapsed onto the couch, weeping softly. I didn't touch her. Not yet. But I stayed. For the first time in months, I stayed. Because something had shifted. The past couldn't be erased, but the truth was finally louder than the lies. Gerald left 3 days later. My mother helped pack his things into boxes. He didn't resist. No rage, no denial. Just a slow, mechanical compliance, the kind you'd expect from someone who knew deep down that they'd been found out, that their curtain had finally dropped. The police questioned him after the incident with the teenage girl. Between the neighborhood reports, the home camera footage, and our own testimonies, they had enough to place him under a formal psychiatric evaluation. But as expected, he slipped into the cracks of the system. declared cognitively impaired, confused, and no longer a threat. They let him go under supervised care. It wasn't justice, but it was distance, and for now, that had to be enough. I moved back in with my mother temporarily, not because I forgave her, not because we magically fixed things, but because healing sometimes begins where the hurt happened, and because I wanted to see what she would do with the truth now that she could no longer ignore it. She began therapy. On her own. She told me one night over tea, trembling eyes red but no longer hiding. "I used to think love meant loyalty," she said, stirring honey into her cup. "But now I think it means protection. And I failed you at both. I didn't respond right away. I just let her words settle in the air between us. That was the first time I saw her not as a mother or as a woman blinded by comfort, but as a human being, flawed, broken, trying. I still lock my door at night. That part hadn't changed. Maybe it never would. Some fears root themselves too deeply. I still checked the hallway twice before going to the bathroom. Still startled at creaks in the floor. Still slept with a light on more often than I like to admit. But I also began to reclaim space. I unpacked my suitcase, rehung some old photos, opened the blinds. I even let the cat sleep at the foot of my bed again. Angela came by often. She brought warmth, jokes, trashy magazines, small lifelines that reminded me I was still allowed to laugh, that I still had a future not defined by him. And one evening, about a month after Gerald was gone, I stood in the hallway outside my room. No lights, just silence. I walked to the doorway, the same one where he had stood all those nights. I stood in that same spot. I imagined what it must have looked like, a man standing in the shadows, feeding off power, off silence, off the illusion of control. And I breathed. Just one deep, steady breath. Then I turned away and shut the door behind me, not in fear this time, but in defiance. Because he wasn't there anymore. Because I was. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever fully stop looking over my shoulder. But I do know this truth is a light. And once you let it in, even the darkest hallways can't stay dark forever. What do you think about this story? How did it make you feel? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like the video if it touched you and subscribe for more real and powerful stories like this.